So I've been extremely fortunate in that the CSE educational curriculum has been made available to me through a Google Drive link. So thanks to AJ on that one, which means I have the aforementioned algebra video. You'll remember some streams back I want was like, hey, I wonder if he could actually teach me algebra, if it'd just be a nightmare since I didn't do good at math through primary and secondary school. Um, But then I noticed in the set that was given to me by AJ, there's a series on electricity, and I'm like, oh, this is definitely up my alley because that's what I focused on through high school and where my main, um, you know, enjoyment in the sciences really is electricity and electromechanical systems and electronics. You'll notice it almost all ties together. About the only thing I like that doesn't involve electricity in some way is typewriters. And even those can be, electromechanical down the line. So, yeah, we're just going to get right into this. Let me minimize myself because I already preset everything. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention there's a new avatar going on, a variation on my traditional style, the one. Um, Ran it through ChatGPT, came up with something cool. This morning I took one side and mirrored the other since they were slightly asymmetrical, and I think this came out really nice. So we're just gonna roll with this going forward for a while till I get bored and change to something new or have need to do a special, special thing like Tomato Noah that we had back in the day. And yeah, so I just wanted to point that out because it's freaking awesome. So. And minimize myself again. You see the shadow of the Hovend, knowing what we're in for. Let me make sure everything's copacetic on this end. Yep, looks like we're good, and let's get to playing. I would say playing and praying, but no, we've got to deal with this straight up hell. Let me know if there's any issues. It's go time.
All right, well, welcome to the first class on basic electricity. We're going to try to learn some interesting things in this class. My name is Kent Hovend. I was a high school science teacher for 15 years, and my dad was an electrical engineer at Caterpillar Tractor Company for many years, retired from that job. My mother was a kindergarten teacher for many years and retired from teaching kindergarten. So she got us started early, learning to read real early, and learning to love to learn. What we want to teach you in this class are quite a
If you love to learn, Kent, why do you know jack diddly shit about anything? Serious question. If you really love to learn, you would actually be able to carry on active conversations in a variety of subjects, a variety of sciences, a variety of philosophies, and actively engage rather than resorting purely to a script. Now, one could say, modern day Kent, oh, he's an old man, he's got to use the script. But no, this is what he's done perpetually. From the moment this man discovered that Microsoft PowerPoint was available, he established his script and has just been rolling with it ever since. Also, let's not ignore the fact he had to bring his mommy and daddy into stuff because Kent Hoven's an overgrown man child. And you have to question, he knows he's being filmed for this as a presentation. Does he open all of his classes this way? And he probably does. Or probably did, I should say.
variety of things. We're going to teach you how electricity is produced. We're going to teach you how to be safe around electricity. We're going to teach you what volts and amps and watts and ohms are. You're going to learn the basics about electricity. The purpose of the class is to have you have some knowledge of how it works and how to fix things. We'll be doing all sorts of interesting hands-on activities in this class. Today, though, we're going to give you kind of lay the foundation of just exactly what is electricity, how do they make it, where do they keep it at, why does it cost so much, and
Oh yeah, got to throw that boomer humor in for a bunch of middle and high school kids circa 2000. Yeah, they really care about that shit. It's totally endearing hearing old people complain about the cost of utilities. Wow.
and how it can kill you just like that. Electricity has absolutely no conscience whatsoever.
Just like you.
It wants one thing. It wants to get to the ground.
And yes, the audio gets quieter right there. It just dies down, so I apologize for that. I could possibly turn it up on the restream end if you need me to. Otherwise, yeah.
And if it goes through you on the way, that's perfectly fine with the electricity. It doesn't care how it gets there, but it wants to get to the ground. And so if your body...
Now, what bothers me is that him saying that electricity wants to get to the ground. Hey, look, it's the Debian Linux swirl back there. Cool. Uh, Kent wouldn't know Linux if it bit him. I think I'm talking about where he lives now. Anyway, I was gonna say, him talking about going to the ground sounds weird and unintuitive, but this is one of those horrible moments that shows that Kent actually does kind of have a clue what he's talking about, more so than the average layperson. That he actually does have some comprehension on this concept, I should say. And depending on where this goes, we'll touch into that more and see if he accurately does or doesn't address the nature of it. Because your typical the way the electrical grid works is really, really fascinating. Like the way we just kind of make it happen and what we actually just, I'll explain it one day, or maybe Kent will actually explain it well. We'll see what happens. I don't want to just go on a rant about electricity production. Spoils the whole damn video.
He provides the wire, that's absolutely no problem. Now, on the way, it may cook all your blood out of your body. You know, if electricity goes through, like lightning hits you on the head, it cooks your blood, which is not a good thing to have.
Yeah, I'm with that guy. Get up and walk immediately, because Kent is sitting there to kids saying it might fry all the blood out of your body. Like, what the fuck, Kent? What the fuck even is that? Why would you say something like that? Why would you talk like that? Oh, right, you have no sense of decency. You have no sense of proper time and place. Also, I want to point out that stupid clock on the wall and how much I fucking hate those clocks that look like your typical wristwatch. It's so fucking stupid. Then again, it was the 90s slash maybe early 2000.
So we'll talk more about safety around electricity. How is it transmitted across the city? How do they get it from where they make it to here? And what happens to it when we're done with it? I mean, why can't we recycle this stuff anyway?
Man talking about recycling electricity, which is weird given his general political leanings and stance, thinking about recycling. But of course, it only matters for how much it costs because of what he immediately follows with.
We have to keep paying for new electricity over and over and over and over and over.
If I may go on a side rant, Kent, much like people not comprehending that when you buy a video game, you don't own the video game, you have a license to run the software, and they previously just weren't able to really enforce that beyond you having the physical cartridge, which can be given to somebody, and now they can enforce those rights. So it's just a sucky situation where technology caught up. You don't pay for electricity per se. You pay a rate to cover the sheer upkeep of this equipment, of this infrastructure. And yeah, there's profit margins involved because everything's a goddamn corporation and all that jazz. But what it boils down to is you're paying for a complete service that the billing rate is based on power usage. Now, of course, you want to dumb it down, but I really feel I need to stress that what you're actually paying for. You should remember that. You should keep that context in. It's like people complaining about vehicle registration, and they're like, all I get's a sticker, that you put on the license plate of your car, and it's like, no, the sticker indicates that you paid the license fee. You're paying a government approved fee for this stuff in the area you live in. That's what's happening. Like, you don't even understand what you're actually doing, and then it makes you think ridiculous things and say ridiculous things about the thing you don't actually understand. Then again, this is Hovind. What else is new?
Nobody's figured out a way to recycle it. If you get that one, you'll be a multi-gazillionaire. Figure out a way to recycle it. How to be safe around electricity. How basic electrical things work. For instance, when you stick something into the wall to plug it in, what's behind that? My brother's been teaching 5th grade for 34 years.
Which brother? The one who looks more like Eric Hovind, or the brother with the god-awful hair?
He said last year his students were studying the map of the world. They had a big map up there, and they learned about all the continents and all the oceans. And one of his students, who was a pretty bright student, raised his hand. He said, "Mr. Hovind," he said, "I know all the continents. I know all the oceans. I've studied this map quite a while now." He said, "But I have one question."
It's not gonna do me any good. I mean, I can up volume on my end. Is the volume acceptable on y'all's end? Because I'm about to up it in Restream. Actually, let me go in and do that if I can make the magic happen. There's this Lord Yamato. We'll move it to 115 on y'all's end.
What's on the other side?
And yeah, I interrupted the middle of that god awful joke. Supposed to have a great student, his brother did, and the kid asked what's on the other side of a map now that he's learned everything, and it's like, one, doubt it happened or it was a joke, but from the student if it did happen. But more importantly, if the kid really doesn't comprehend what the map represents, well, that shows a serious problem with teaching the fundamentals of what things represent what and how we understand data representations, which goes hand in hand with the fact that you can't understand that lines on paper represent actual evidence.
Wow. Where do you start to answer a question like that? What's on the other side? Well, with electricity, there is something on the other side. When you plug something in, what's on the other side? We're going to learn about that. What on earth is a circuit breaker? How does a switch work? What we hope to do is get a bunch of these things, switches, outlets, not only let you wire them up, actually do the wiring and see how they work. We're going to saw some in half and show you what's going on the inside so you understand it. My dad started me off when I was little bitty, teaching us all kinds of things about electricity.
Now, here's how you steal it from the neighbors. And here's how you don't pay your taxes. And here's how, when World War III happens, you get out of it, become the only survivor of your platoon, and your kids will constantly sit there and brag about you being a war hero, even though you were laid up with some stupid fucking disease. All my friends are dead.
He was an electrical engineer. He would design the systems for big buildings like Caterpillar Tractor Company when they're going to build tractors and stuff like that. So we're going to study just a few things today about the basics of electricity. We're going to learn in this class how outlets work and switches work and circuit breakers work and fuses, and why if you blow a fuse on your house, you should not put a penny in there. It will work for a while, but there's a reason for that fuse, and we're going to understand why you have fuses in your car and in your house and anything electrical, and why it is not smart to bypass the fuses. Okay? Sort of like if you've got a chain and you're hanging from a chain and one of the links starts to break, and so you scotch tape around it real quick. Not a good idea. Okay?
And of course, let's not get started on him being one of the typical people who does the genericized trademark thing and says scotch tape. Can't just say put some tape around it or something. He has to go, brand name stuff, because for some reason that shit we do in the English speaking world.
Replace that link instead, all right? Hope you get in this class a knowledge of how electricity works, just some of the basics, and believe me, there is a lot to learn on this topic. You could study for years and years and years and never learn it all. Some of you may become electricians, some of you may become missionaries, where you have to go out onto the mission field and make your own electricity, if you want some.
And there comes the Jesus talk.
You go to a little village where they don't have anything, and you have to set up the whole system for them. I don't know if we can learn all that in this 7-week class, but we'll get as much as we can. Years ago, somebody discovered...
And then watch as they scrap all that and trade it to people for food. Because, they don't need Jesus. Electricity can help them, but what they really need is food and medicine.
Something very interesting. If you put two different metals together, they produce an electric current. Electrons start moving.
Yeah, way to oversimplify, Kent. It's specific metals, and when you start rambling here, you're really gonna make things pretty muddy by the examples you bring up and what you're trying to say versus what you actually say. I've watched ahead enough to know that I do want to cover this, but not much further than about this point.
Most of the metals in the world have... Let me get my wire here. Here we go. Most of the metals in the world, like iron, copper, zinc, gold, silver, lead, tin, there are a bunch of different metals. All of them have molecules. Everything's made out of molecules. Some of these molecules have electrons that are able to move pretty easily.
Most of the metals, lists off random metals, have all things are made of molecules. He could have skipped all that and just gotten to the electrons, which isn't even accurate. Now, granted, exact details on what's going on at the quantum level with electrical current flow is really weird. Really weird. But even then, just saying electrons like to move is not entirely accurate.
If I put a whole string of balls, like from a pool table, on one big long string, and I bang on the first one, the last one moves, doesn't it?
Yeah, right up Matt Powell's ass.
That energy gets transferred from that first one to that last one, just like that. If I put a long steel pole up against your head, and I get on this end, and I tap it with a hammer, bing, you feel it way down there right away, don't you?
See, more of that violent rhetoric. He can't not say something that isn't just otherwise like violence the only word. It's like just it's weird.
Now the seal at this end didn't move all the way down to that end, did it? Each one bumped all the molecules along the way, like a whole crowd of people. The first guy falls over, and they all fall down. Well,
Slow and sub only. Sub because Hovendites, I just don't feel like dealing with them, and slow because I want the chat to at least be manageable for me. I'm starting to get to a point where the chat's getting way too fast for me to be able to begin to cover it like I like to.
the electrons that are in the molecules of iron can move. So if I move this one at this end, the other one moves off real quickly. Somebody also discovered that if you wrap a wire around a piece of steel and you hook it to a battery, just a regular flashlight battery, the nail becomes magnetic.
Wow, Kent. In your 6 kinds of evolution, you complain about, starting with life and you got to get all these other steps. And you're sitting here talking about people already having batteries discovering electromagnetism. Or the fact that electricity and magnetism are one and the same, and are thus a phenomenon known as electromagnetism. Kent, come on, dude. Start with the basics. You are all over the place, and this is why I stress this man cannot teach. He is all over the place constantly. He has no planning for this stuff. Or if he has planned it, he sucks at planning. His PowerPoint thing was the same way. It was just some, ad hoc this, that, and the other, whatever he felt like talking about in the moment. No basics, no nothing. Just here's an already existing slide. I'm going to show you how to do things with it. And that was marketed as a lesson in how to use PowerPoint. It's crazy.
An electromagnet. How many have ever done that experiment before where you pick up stuff with, okay, we don't need to bother with that then, but because it'll kill my battery here. You hook up the battery to the wire going around the nail, and it becomes a magnet, and you can pick up paper clips or something. If you get enough electricity with enough wraps around the nail and a strong enough nail and something big enough to hold it with, you can have an electromagnet that you use at the junkyard, and they can pick up a car just with electricity running through a wire around a piece.
Yes, Kent, and you haven't explained any of that. These kids are clueless as to the actual why of that. Now, bringing it up, if you were to bring it up less directly, more of just a mentioning of things and being like, oh, we'll get to why that works, that would have worked. But this, you're just talking about shit on the fly.
Piece of steel. They can actually adjust how strong do they want that magnet.
Why is steel the particular metal used, Kent? What is it about iron that makes it such a nice material for a lot of... Actually, not even that great of a material, but it's a conductor enough. Why is copper a better conductor? And then on the other end, why then are power lines aluminum? Come on, Kent. These are big boy questions. Let's get to it.
I toured a place one time where they brought in trainloads of big, huge chunks of steel, big plates of steel. And I'd say, now, suppose you got 50 plates of steel on the train, and you only want to pick up 2 of them. What do you do? He said, oh, I just turn this knob right here. I adjust my magnet for how strong it is, and I set it on there, and it only picks up 2 plates. I can adjust it to pick up 4 plates or 10 plates. Pretty neat. Electromagnet. Not only does electricity through a wire produce magnetism, a magnet going through a wire will produce electricity. They both work together. It's pretty neat.
Are you, are you gonna get to the fact that they're the same thing? Because you to this day you still don't understand space time. That space and time are not separated.
If you take a coil of wire like this picture shows here, and you stick a magnet through a coil of wire, it induces what's called an electric current. Electricity starts moving through the wire. So one day somebody got the brilliant idea, what if we could get this magnet spinning around inside this coil of wire? We could produce electricity in the wire with a spinning magnet. And so that's how almost all electricity is produced in the world today.
It's less conductive, but it is cheaper and, by the biggest thing, lighter, in conjunction with being cheap. So you can get away with using more aluminum to carry the voltage than or to carry the current than needing the proper amount of copper, which is still going to be pretty heavy and yeah,
Somebody is spinning a magnet,
expensive.
a big magnet, inside a big coil of wire. The problem is, who wants to stand there all day and spin that magnet around? So they've always been looking for some ways to spin that big magnet inside that big coil of wire without having a person stand there. Yes, sir. Correct. Hoover Dam, they use the water turning a big wheel, and that wheel is hooked to another pipe, goes over to the big magnet, and it is turning.
Once again, this childish way of explaining things to people who are clearly teenagers. I think they can understand the concept of if you describe a generator with a little more detail and then begin using the word generator. Also, the word turbine is useful here because that's how you extract. Turbines are so far the most efficient way we have of extracting, getting a rotational energy from a working fluid.
A magnet inside a coil of wire. So basically, if a magnet is spinning inside a coil of wire, it's going to produce electricity. But you can't save it. Best analogy I know to explain electricity is with water. So we're going to start today by learning about.
Oh, good fucking God, Kent. Water is actually a horrible analogy for electricity. Just explain electricity as what it is. This man has never taught shit in his life.
Water, how it is moved, and then that'll help you understand how electricity moves. If I built a water tower and filled a big, huge tank full of water up in the roof, okay? Water is heavy. It produces pressure, right? This is pushing down, and the water's going to leak out the bottom of my tower unless I put a bottom to it, right? Then I'm going to run a pipe.
Dog walkers, aluminum's only primarily used for the high voltage transmission stuff. Your typical wiring from the transformer points on down at going into the subscriber. I'll use phone terminology there, customer, what have you. That's gonna be copper. But for the high voltage stuff, still mostly aluminum, and I forget the exact ratios of elements and what have you of it. Where there's variations and such. It's been a while since I deep dived into the U.S. power grid.
Pipe down from the tower, and I'm going to run that pipe over to my house. I now have, coming out this pipe, water pressure. So if I don't do anything about it, that tower is going to drain and fill up my house full of water, right? Well, we don't want that, so we're going to put a valve on there to shut it off, okay? So we have a valve on here to shut the water off. If my valve leaks, it's going to still fill up the house. A little slower, right? So you have to have a valve that doesn't leak. So
a valve that doesn't leak, and he's describing electricity. What the fuck, Kent? Electricity doesn't leak like that. Not like water. This is why I don't like water analogies. They allow you to understand in a practical sense, a very basic practical sense, the concept of voltage, amperage, and current through analogy. Amperage is current. Voltage and amperage and resistance through analogy, but very loose analogies to establish the base principles of what those concepts are. All right. Electricity doesn't behave like water.
I have a bunch of houses.
And indeed, you can only use those water analogies because you're dealing with an effective redistribution of potential energy as kinetic energy. And so the analogies work because in the grand scheme, you're doing the same processes. When you boil it down, potential energy becoming kinetic. But that's as far as it goes.
All along this pipe. We got a big long pipe with a whole bunch of houses. Everybody turns their water on all at the same time. The first guy gets pretty good pressure. Water goes squirting out of the hose pretty good. This guy gets a little bit less pressure, and as you go down the line, pretty soon when you get way down here, the last guy turns on the water and just drip, 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 right? There's two things about water. One is the pressure.
Okay, it's really great that electricity doesn't work like that at all.
How hard is it pushing? The second one is the volume. How much water is going through? If I had a whole lot of pressure and a little tiny hole for the water to come out, like a squirt gun, I could probably squirt water from here across the highway, right? But there wouldn't be a lot of water coming out. It would just be a lot of pressure, right? Now, suppose I got a bigger hose, like a fire hose. If I get a big fire hose and put a lot of pressure behind it, now it'll squirt across the highway, and when it gets there, it'll knock somebody down, right?
The kids giggle, but again, with the violent rhetoric, knowing the kind of stuff we know about the man, this stuff's really disturbing.
With water, you have not only the pressure, how hard is it pushing, you also have how much water's coming out. If I gave you a fire hose with 20 pounds of pressure on it, you got a 4-inch hose and 20 pounds of pressure. And I told you to fill a swimming pool with the water. You could probably do that. If I gave you a 1/16 inch hose, just a little tiny hose the size of the lead in a pencil, but I gave you 10,000 pounds of pressure, and you started squirting that 10,000 pounds of pressure, it would probably cut through the concrete on the swimming pool, but it would take forever to fill it. You just can't get enough water through that small of a pipe.
No, you would fill it because you'd still be above the rate of evaporation. I mean, come on, Kent. I understand time spans that go on longer than the fucking fart in the wind are something you absolutely abhor. But yeah, that example, aside from the joke about cutting through concrete, because pretty high pressure, you definitely do some damage to stuff. If you angled it the right way, curved it around some particular metals that could handle it, what have you, to decelerate it, you could fill up that swimming pool. But that's neither here nor there. But I just want to stress that it could actually happen because you'd still get an amount of water flow.
The other problem starts to build up is you got to have a pretty heavy-duty pipe to handle that kind of pressure because it's going to blow the pipe up, right? So with electricity, you got the same basic idea. Somebody downtown is producing.
Michael, he's trying, but he's so scattered. He has not established anything, and he's working backwards on the teaching. He's trying to establish ideas that have not been set up yet via analogy, when the analogy is used after the concept is set up. He's getting into the ideas of voltage and the like, but it's still probably going to screw them up. It's incredible how fucking terrible he is as a teacher.
Producing electricity with a big generator where they have a magnet spinning inside a coil of wire. They probably have a bunch of them. Now, in order to turn that magnet, there's all kinds of ways they do that. What are some ways they turn the magnet? You mentioned one with water. What kind of power is that called? Hydroelectric. They're using water to produce electricity. Actually, the water is just turning the wheel, which is turning the generator. How else?
Yes, Kent. And can you explain why that's important? Can you explain how the actual... I'm going to say this, and I know it is functionally wrong, how the energy is generated, i.e., what is happening that the water spinning, as you call it, the wheel, moving the magnet around to generate electricity, what's actually happening? the potential and thus how it's moving, the kinetic energy of the water flow is being directly converted to electricity via the generator. Converting that rotation, that mechanical energy, that fluid flow into rotational energy, that's stimulating the electromagnetic fields and is generating current. I hate having to do this off the cuff because I stumble across along my words because my brain's running, a mile a second on this thing, and I just cannot, get the ideas out without them all crashing together. But see, that's a very critical teaching lesson because this involves basic physics, and that again, energy is neither created nor destroyed, just changes forms. This is an exact example of it. You've taken what amounts to gravitational potential and have converted it into electron volts in this example. That's pretty fucking cool. But you gloss over that, probably to give yourself more time to make more stupid jokes. And is this son of a bitch wearing a Dinosaur Adventureland shirt? Is that what that fucking shit up there? Is that a pocket? I mean, are those words? Is that red thing actually something? I can't tell. I mean, I love me some VHS, but man, the fuzziness.
How else can they turn that generator? Use steam, okay? In that case, you'd have to have something to heat the water, because when water expands and turns to steam, it expands how many times?
When water expands, it turns to steam and it expands. How many times?
Who remembers from a couple of classes ago? 1,700 times. A little drop of water will expand 1,700 times, and just about nothing will stop it. It's got a real lot of pressure behind it. So as it expands, if you could have a wheel that could be turned by steam, you have to heat the water, the steam comes out, and it spins the wheel. But now you got to heat the water.
A turbine, Kent. We don't spin wheels. You rotate turbines. You grew up with engineers and you don't seem to understand what a turbine is. Only probably the single coolest piece of mechanical engineering ever devised. I mean, there's so many awesome mechanisms out there, but the turbine and its pure efficiency, absolutely beautiful.
So how are you going to do that? Burn coal, burn wood, burn, anything will burn.
Use radioactive decay to generate ridiculous amounts of thermal energy, allowing you to generate vast quantities of electrical power cleanly and efficiently. How about we go that route, Kent? It's not the fucking 19th century anymore, all right? We have technology. Oh, look, there's a turbine. There's a turbine system right there. You can almost see the word. Wow. This diagram, these lines on paper are real science.
Basically, it's cheaper to burn coal. Okay, so most of the factories will burn coal. They bring in trainloads of coal to Pensacola, and they burn this coal, and they produce...
Oh, yes. Forgot Pensacola, the center of the universe, according to this fuckwit.
They use the heat to cook the water, to produce the steam, to turn the generator, to make the electricity. That's called a coal-fired plant to make electricity. How else could you make electricity? All you got to do is turn the magnet. Yes. With the wind. You put a big windmill out there. The wind blows on the fan, whoosh, 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 and it turns the generator and produces electricity. What happens when the wind quits blowing?
You boomer. Renewable shuck.
No more electricity. If you have a dam to stop up...
Yeah, that's why you use those for peak demand, which is especially convenient during the day when it's hot, and so you're liable to have greater winds. It works perfect to help offset the air conditioning. And you use sources, again, like nuclear for your base load.
Up the water, and the water's going down through to turn your fan, and you run out of water, no more electricity.
Water's going down to turn your fan. Even 25, 30 years ago, this man was slipping.
Yes. Atomic power. Atomic power, basically...
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Did you see that? Did you see that scoff he gave there? Oh, this motherfucker's about to piss me off.
Electricity. Yes. Atomic power.
See, did you see that right there? A little, ooh, off, you fuck. Sorry, this man's about to blaspheme.
Atomic power basically is doing the same thing as coal. You're using atomic energy to produce the heat, to cook the water, to make the steam, to turn the wheel.
To cook the water, to make the steam, to turn the wheel.
To turn the generator, to make the electricity. But basically, all of them are trying to do one thing.
Okay, he didn't say anything stupid. And yeah, it's actually been a joke with me and friends through the years that nuclear power is just glorified steam. Because it is. But water is abundant. It can contain a lot of heat energy, thus its boiling point, once it does boil, it's got a lot of energy. It behaves in very understandable properties. It can be used to spin turbines with great efficiency. And when your heat source is nuclear decay, you got something that, contrary to what a lot of idiots think, is extremely safe. Just got to be a little careful with it. But it's like flying. Flying is incredibly safe. Now, if there is an accident, you're more likely to have a really bad time, but statistically, it's the safest way to travel. Nuclear power is kind of the same way. If you do have an accident, it's a bit of a problem. But of course, we've only really had one major accident, like super major, Chernobyl. Fukushima was its own set of issues that were actually due to particular chain of events unrelated to the reactors themselves. You know, basements flooding and lack of a diesel backup because it flooded from a tsunami kind of does that shit. And 3 Mile Island was the shitty reporting of it did more damage than the actual incident did. Of course, that's just the big three. There's been other nuclear incidents, but still, I could sit here and talk about nuclear power all day. Let's get back to Hovind.
Turn the magnet. You turn that big old magnet inside that big old coil of wire, and it makes electricity. Now, why that works, I'm not sure anybody knows all the details exactly why it works, but it does work, and we use it all the time.
No one knows exactly why it works. Can't we understand electromagnetism pretty damn well.
You could make your own simple generator if you had a little electric motor, if you had 2 magnets and a coil of wire, like this simple diagram shows. The magnets, then, we had a kid for science class made his own little electric motor. It just had like 6 loops of wire, and it turned, produced about 1/2 of a hamster power. Maybe less than that, okay? But if you get a strong enough magnet and enough coils of wire and some way to turn it, then you start to get some problems. You know, it's going to turn. Well, you got to keep it from flopping around while it turns. So you have to have bearings to hold it straight. And you have to have a way to get your electricity off of there. So the brushes have to ride on there. As it turns, it rubs against this copper brush, and now the electricity is moving, but eventually you wear out the brushes. Because if you can't just keep rubbing on something forever, pretty soon you're going to wear it out.
No comment.
And with electric motors, there are things that wear out, and we'll teach you how to fix those here in this class. So the pressure produced by the water and the volume of water is exactly like it is.
If you don't know about wind scale, look up wind scale. It is damn fascinating. Long and the short of it was in a very specialized reactor used for, atomic bomb production, for the production of the particular isotopes needed for Britain getting the bomb. There came a few problems in the process and the way the particular materials used to encase the rods and all that jazz were. I can't explain it very well off the cuff. Resulted in a fire inside the reactor. Because this was a sort of open air, semi-open air assembly. It was a reactor in the sense of you put stuff in there to react. It wasn't, a nice little containment building or anything. And thankfully, the fact that a guy in the engineering team had actually had the wherewithal to be like, hey, we really need scrubbers on the top just in case. And they were put in after the fact on the wind scale piles. Managed to somewhat contain the radiation release. Kind of saved a nice chunk of England from being a little fucked.
with electricity. They're producing the pressure downtown at the electric plant. They're sending it out through wires to my house. We got to have a valve to shut it off, because we don't want the electricity just running all over the floor. It doesn't run on the floor, but like water. So we have switches to shut it off.
You know how else you can turn things off, Kent? You want to know what does the same thing as a switch? Let's say you've got a light bulb. It's just glowing away. You want to know how to turn the light bulb off, even if you don't have a switch? The bulb itself becomes the switch. You unscrew it. As long as you have an open in the circuit, there's no current flow. There's plenty of potential, but no current flow. Nothing you're going to get billed for, because God forbid Kent Hovind pay for utilities with money people are giving him.
If you shut off a switch in your house, whatever that wire goes to stops working, doesn't it? You shut off the light goes out. Electricity flows in what is called a circuit. Here's a picture of a simple circuit on the board. You notice they have a battery for the source of electricity, and there are all kinds of different batteries. Here is a D battery. It produces 1 1/2 volts. A volt is the amount of pressure.
Who the fuck talks like that? 1 1/2 volts? I mean, I love me some archaic stuff, but that's obtuse.
So when it comes to electricity, the pressure is measured in volts. The amount of water that's flowing through the wire is measured in amps. This will be something on the quiz you need to learn. Volts and amps. If somebody says, wow, that's got 10,000 volts, is it dangerous? Maybe not. You can walk across the rug and get static electricity and shock somebody on the ear with 10,000 volts, and it doesn't kill
Danger. Danger. Hovind being right for once.
them. They turn around and kill you for doing it, but, it doesn't kill them, right? High voltage is not necessarily dangerous unless you have high amperage, too. Just like a squirt gun with a lot of pressure, if you get squirted with a squirt gun with high pressure, it'll sting real bad. Maybe even cut your skin.
Fun fact, my electronics teacher in high school was a coach, but he also knew his stuff. He was involved in ballistic missile tests in the Pacific during his time in the military. He told the story about one that came crashing back on the pad, but was aimed in such a way where debris would have blown their way, and they dived it back into the hardened launch facility. I forget the name. Blockhouse. Yeah, that was pretty fun. I wish he was. He's probably passed. I kind of wish he was still around so I could catch up with him. But that was 23, 24 years ago now.
But it probably won't kill you. Now, if you get squirted with a fire hose with a lot of pressure, ooh, now that starts, breaking bones and, taking your head off and stuff.
Hey, where does this come from? Oh, yeah, a little electricity won't kill you, but if you got a lot of pressure behind it, like a big fire hose, it'll break your bones, take an arm off, remove little Hovind. Then what are you going to do? Joe won't come to bed with you anymore. Oh, wait, she doesn't anymore ever after 2015, 16 range.
Stuff like that.
You're going to get divorced by your wife. You don't know it past Hovind, but you done fucked up already.
Okay, so if somebody says that's 10,000 volts, and wow, it sounds big, but it may not be dangerous at all.
Yeah, static, like you build up as you walk in, and yeah, you shock your friends. That only travels like it does because of high voltage. The air gap requires a tremendous amount of voltage to actually, be crossed. You're going to need a lot of power going, and so a potential for power flow. And then a tiny little jump of current goes through as the voltages balance out. Yeah, static electricity is extremely high voltage, and that's why you want to avoid static when working with electronics, because those high voltages create enough peak current, even for those slight moments, where it'll fry stuff that's designed for 5 and maybe 12 volts, like most integrated circuits are.
We have a little Van de Graaff generator we'll be setting up in this class that produces, like 10 or 12,000 volts. And hold your finger next to it, and a spark jumps, bam, ah. It just stings. It doesn't hurt you. That electricity wants to do one thing, just like this water wants to do one thing. This water wants to get as low as it can get, and then it wants to lay there. Just like kids, right? I want to get down on the floor, and I want to lay here. Okay, leave me alone. Basically, the water is lazy. It wants to get, but on the way down to the floor, it's willing to do some work for you.
Has nothing at all to do with being lazy, Kent, and I take offense to that analogy. It's called gravity, potential energy. It wants to get lower because gravity's pulling it. It's saying it wants to. Again, anthropomorphizes it, and we don't like that around here. But gravity's pulling it to the towards the center of the mass of the Earth because everything wants to find a nice equilibrium. And being elevated up high isn't equilibrium for that kind of stuff.
If you tell the water, okay, fellas, listen, I'm going to let you down to the floor, but on the way, you got to turn this wheel. All right, I'll turn the wheel on the way by. So it'll spin the wheel on the way by. But it's just trying to get to the floor, right? The electricity just wants to get to the ground. If you want to make it do some work on the way, okay, it'll do it. But if you just let it go to the ground, then it'll be glad to do that too. What we have in a battery here, we have the ground on this end and the positive on this end. They put some chemicals together and it produced a lot of
At that point, Kent, you won't refer to it as ground or earth or anything of the sort. You would simply refer to it as the positive and negative terminals of the battery. And I'm not going to get into the debate of positive and negative charges being improperly named, and that with the way things are, they actually should be reversed. But we're about a century and a half too late for that. Come on, Kent.
extra electrons, electricity. They would like to get from here to here, but they can't because of the stuff they built in a battery. So if I took a wire from here to here and just put a wire straight there, it'll start going through that wire real fast, and within a few seconds the battery will be dead. It'll be neutralized. There's no more electricity in it. And what do you do with that when they're done? You throw them away. You can only get so much electricity out of a battery. Some batteries are rechargeable, but if you don't put more electricity in it, you might as well throw it away.
It's not exactly what you're doing. It's not how it works. It's not a jar that you put electricity into. You're using electric current to separate things, to reestablish that imbalance in charge potential. That is how the battery functions. So it's kind of like a piece of Velcro. You know, you can take the two pieces and then stick them together. Excuse me, I just used a genericized trademark. Let me correct myself. Hook and loop fasteners, commonly called Velcro. Hey, see? Called my own self out on this shit. Anyway, what if you want to stick them together again? You have to peel them apart first. It's a very weak analogy, but that's the way to think about it. You're not putting more electricity into a battery. It isn't like a fuel tank. If you're recharging one, you're reestablishing that difference in potential through chemical processes, what have you. Battery chemistry, especially rechargeable battery chemistry, is pretty fascinating. You know, the reason lithium-ion batteries are the way they are, the reason nickel-cadmium, the reason lead acids are the way they are. I remind you, a lot of industrial trucks, like the walkie stackers, at a lot of retail places in the back room, basically walking forklifts that use just pure electric power, they use flooded batteries. You literally put water in the sons of bitches. And that's part of how the actual current flow and the differential is made. It's crazy tech that, I read up on it and then I forget it just as quickly because that's just kind of how my memory is. But it's cool shit. But that's all you're doing when you recharge a battery. It's not a bottle. It's not a gas tank filled with stuff. Just I know I'm a nerd on this stuff, but I'm really freaking anal when it comes to the accurate terminology of how anything electrical works.
On the way, as electricity goes through that wire, it's going to go through there as fast as it can. If I put a great...
Oh, and Zoso, yeah, I noticed that too. I guess yes is the answer. Because, yeah, he's talking like half shop, half, science. Like, which is it, Kent?
Big wire on there, it'll kill the battery in just a half a second probably. It'll drain all the electricity out. If I put a real tiny wire,
Kent, it's not going to kill the battery that freaking quickly.
now all the electricity has to try to squeeze through that little tiny wire. It's going to be pushing really hard. It's going to make the wire get hot. Actually, you can make the wire get so hot, if you figure this out just right, it'll get hot, it'll glow and produce light. That's what a flashlight does. The electricity is going from here to here. On the way, we're going to send it through a little tiny wire, special kind of wire, that gets really hot and glows when it gets hot. And you call that a flashlight. Inside there, hard to see in there now, there's a little bitty wire inside a glass ball. And if that little bitty wire breaks, what happens? Flashlight quits working. You have a circuit. The electricity wants to get from one end to the other end. That's all it wants to do.
No, the two voltage differences are going to cause a current flow, which is what you pull from. Electricity doesn't want to get anywhere. Electricity is a descriptor of a phenomena we see as charge potentials balance out in the electromagnetic field. That's it. Electricity isn't really a thing in one sense of looking at it.
It's willing to do some work on the way. It's willing to heat up that wire. Electricity can be used for all sorts of interesting things. You can use it to produce light. What else do we use electricity for? To produce heat.
And this would be the part where if I was Kent, I would end up explaining, fun fact, everything using electricity winds up producing some amount of heat. The light, the tungsten filament would get hot. Heat. Computer, waste heat from the processor doing its thing. In fact, the only electrical device that is effectively 100% efficient, or as close as possible, happens to be a space heater. Since in the end, virtually everything it produces is heat one way or another. Save for maybe, the light telling you it's on and the noise of the fan, if it's got one, which you usually do.
People have done lots of studies on this over the years, and they found out some kinds of metal, when electricity goes through them, they get hot. They get too hot, what's going to happen? They're going to melt. Every metal has a melting point. At some point, it's going
Oh yeah, this is late 90s to early 2000-ish tops.
To melt. So I've got electricity coming through the walls of this building down to the electrical outlet. If I plug in 6 hair dryers and all the girls in the room start blow drying their hair, that's an awful lot of electricity trying to get through one wire. What's going to happen? Wire's going to get hot. And when wire gets hot, what's going to happen? It's going to melt. And when it melts, it breaks.
The plastic insulation will start giving out first, and then, yeah, the wire could easily, fail at a point, its structural weak point if it gets too hot in an area. Totally happens. Once again, Hovind being right.
Well, I don't want it to break inside the wall. There's a lot of wires inside the walls here, right? Suppose it melts inside the wall of your house. Well, it's...
Not in Tennessee, you don't. Still banned. I hate this state.
It's awful hot, and now it's melted. Now that electricity still wants to get across that gap, so it's going to be sparking. You could actually set your house on fire or burn it down, or up, whichever way houses burn, by having too much electricity trying to go through a wire. So they're pretty careful with electricity in most counties. They have laws and rules that require that you do things a certain way.
Oh, you're going to ignore the federal codes there, Kent? How convenient. Of course you would.
You don't try to have too small of a wire. Use a big enough wire because that'll determine how much electricity can go through it. If you use a little tiny wire and try to run your blow dryer on it, it'll work for a few seconds. Then the wire's going to melt. Now, if this wire is melting out someplace where it's safe, that's no problem. I just put a new one on. So what they've done is they put a special place to keep all the wires where they're going to melt.
Oh, I hate the fact that I know that Kent is actually going to do all right with this. And I'll give credit where credit is due. In this little moment, he's actually doing some good teaching. This works. Good job, Hovind. You've got a period halfway through this where it all's kind of coming together.
It's called your fuse box or circuit breaker panel.
Ooh, he preempted me. I was about to say, or circuit breaker, right as they show a good old circuit breaker. Oh, if you haven't had to flip a circuit breaker, you are missing out on a wonderful experience. Those are some great feeling switches. Just a wonderful feel to them. And it's one thing turning one off if you need to work on something, but then the feeling of turning it back on, feeling it engage and close the circuit, ooh, that's some good stuff right there. Nice, satisfying thwunk. And that's the sound they make. It isn't thunk, it isn't chunk, it's thwunk. Love it.
All that basically is, that's the weakest spot in the house for the wire.
Not exactly, Kent. I mean, for a fuse, yes. For a circuit breaker, it's a little complex doodad that's designed to open at a certain under certain conditions. What's cool is that you can engineer these things to only blow after a certain amount of time at a certain current rating. So you can have, let's say, just random numbers, something that is rated 50 amps, but when this machine starts up, it might pull 80. Well, it would blow every time it starts. But what if you have something that's time delayed to maybe be able to handle 80 amps or 100 amps for maybe 5 seconds, long enough for things to get going and the current flow to lower? Then you're safe. That's how a lot of stuff works. It's pretty cool shit. Um, there's more fuses than you'd think inside of like game consoles and the like. I've had to replace a ton through many years.
This is a circuit breaker. It's a switch. We'll take one of these apart later and show you how it works inside. But the electricity goes through this switch, and then it goes out to someplace in the house. If you're trying to get too much electricity through there, you got 6 blow dryers plugged in, one circuit.
Justin, I don't know. I have no idea. If anyone can fill in on those details, definitely mention it.
Take a lot of electricity. There's a little spring in here that's going to get hot. And instead of exploding or melting, it's just going to trip. So when you trip a circuit breaker, you're trying to get too much electricity through it.
Oh, that sound wasn't good enough. You know, you have to feel one to get that full thwunk, that little kink that the mic picked up. It's only half the sound.
So you say, okay, we blew the circuit breaker. First of all, find out why you blew it. Go unplug some of the blow dryers, okay? Tell the girls to have a wet head today. Then go back and you push it one way and it resets it and cock it back, and now it's hooked up again. It's possible for a circuit breaker to go bad. This could actually go bad. These cost, Bill, typical circuit, $5 to $20, depending on, Bill does most electrical wiring around here at this place, so. And they're rated on the end here. Can you read that number on there, sir?
What's the electrical wiring at this place? So we are at DAL. People are coming to.
What's that number on there say?
At least I can presume.
Doesn't say 10, does it? No, this number right on the tip right here. That number right there. 30. That means this little switch in here will handle up to 30 amps. If you get more than 30 amps, it's going to say, nope, I don't want to take any more than that. It'll shut off. The older houses used to have a fuse, which was a little thing you screw in. How many have seen a fuse before? You screw the fuse in. If you get more than 20 amps or 30 amps or whatever that fuse is made for, it'll melt inside. In your car, under the dash of your car, you have fuses. I see some people, they want to have 19 or 20 headlights on their car. I want to be cool. We're going to drive down the highway with 20 headlights. Wow, yeah. That'll impress somebody. Well, you can't run all that electricity through one fuse. They got to have special wiring to handle all that. Or some of these guys want to have that big stereo, in the back of their car. Drive down the street. Boom, 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 boom. People can hear them, it shakes all the buildings miles away. Well, that takes a lot of electricity. And you got to have a fuse, and you got to be able to handle all that. Might have to have an extra battery. Or
he really needs to say power, because that's the end thing. Work overtime. or something to that effect. I forget the exact details and definitions. Just because I love this stuff doesn't mean my memory isn't garbage. Um, you really say something other than electricity, Kent, because you're not getting at the actual meat of the thing.
Whatever, So this is a circuit breaker. When it gets too much electricity, spring will pop inside, and usually there's a little red spot. Actually, we can probably bump it, and it turns red. Red means beep. This one's it tripped. They say a breaker has tripped for some reason. Sometimes they just trip if they get bumped, as you can see. Sometimes they get too much electricity tries to go through. Push it back, recock it, and reset it. We'll take one of these apart in a minute. We're going to go outside now. I'm going to show you how the electricity comes into the property. They're sending it in with high voltage and high amperage. The wires running over the top of the street from the telephone poles in your neighborhood, don't lick them. Once in a while, a squirrel's up there playing around and biting through the wire, and what happens to the squirrel?
Absolutely nothing, because he's not touching anything else. That's why birds hang out on power lines all the time. They're not touching anything else. There's nowhere for the voltage potential to, power to move to, voltage potential to balance out to. Also, for those of you who don't know, when you do see lines, running down the street or something, a telephone pole with stuff on it, the top stuff is your power. Everything else, all the lower stuff, is data cables. It's going to be your cable TV cable slash, cable internet, your fiber lines that may not be buried, etc. Yeah, just so you know. I see people working on, or I'll be with people, and they'll be saying that someone's working on, the power lines. It's like, no, that's data stuff. That's a Comcast truck. They're handling internet. They're like, oh, how do you know? It's like, well, one, it's a Comcast truck, and two, the power lines are the top ones. They wouldn't put high voltage lines low where you could fucking touch them.
Oof, a little puff of fur comes falling down there. Real high voltage and real high amperage. Bill, do you happen to know the voltage coming down? Is this 440? On the street at 7,400? They send out 7,400 volts and probably, who knows how many amps.
They don't send out an amperage. An amperage is the current draw caused by the voltage over the... They don't send out amps, Kent. Voltage is the potential. The amperage on the line is a measure of the actual amount of work being done, power being used over the resistance, resulting in a rated wattage. I'm sorry, I'm having a moment here because he was doing okay, and then he just completely... How many amps? I don't know. Depends on how much shit you hook up.
As many as you want, right? Thousands and thousands. Well, you don't want to plug that into your hairdryer. 7,400 volts is coming down the street on those big wires. Now, if you go out in the country and you see those big, huge towers with the lines running way across the country, where they put those monster steel towers up, those are more like, 70,000, 72,000 volts?
Not on a lot of areas in the U.S. where transformers are right there on the lines and you got a drop line running straight to the house. That's pretty standard stuff, depending on where you are out here when the area was developed. My old neighborhood, half of it ran underground power lines and the other half was above ground.
Volts. 72,000 volts. So you get yourself a wire and a rock on there, and you go up and lasso one of them, and that'll be the last thing you do. Okay.
Yeah, because you're touching the ground and you've done bridge the connection between the high voltage lines and the ground potential, which is what the voltage is measured against. There's only one wire that actually brings you power, right? It's not two. A lot of people think it's two wires that bring them power. It's just the one. The alternating current balance to and fro is measured against ground voltage. So if you want to wonder where does your electricity go after you use it, if you want to think like that, into the ground. It doesn't really work like that because one, it's alternating current, so it's just a case of back and forth. But two, that's for all points and purposes, if you want to think of it as a linear process from the power station to your home, that's the end of the line.
Or sometimes you see all the birds land on a wire, How they don't get shocked, though, because the electricity has no way to get from the bird to the ground. Electricity wants to get to the ground real bad. How?
Yeah, when the voltage is biased against ground potential, as it is in your typical, power station for mains electricity. You're not explaining this stuff well, Kent.
How bad it wants to get there is measured in volts. That's the pressure. The amount of electricity is the amps. Now, there's a little more to it than that, but these are the two basic units you need to learn today, volts and amps. Typically, in your house, most of the things that you plug into the wall are 110 volts. That's
Except it's not 110, it's usually more towards 120.
kind of standard household electricity. Some things might be 220 volts. It's either 110 or 220, twice as much. If it's 220 volts, some of the things you might have in your house that are 220 would be an electric oven, an electric stove, electric water heater, your air conditioner.
At least you didn't say hot water heater.
Electric heaters. Those are probably about the only things. Anything else, Bill? Welder.
And yes, I know hot water heater is technically correct in the context of you're heating water for the hot water line, which is why some people say that. But it seems redundant because you obviously wouldn't be heating up water for the cold line now, would you?
Electric dryer. If you have an electric dryer, that might be 220 volts because it just needs more electricity. What they're doing for a dryer, they're running the electricity through a wire.
Oh yeah, Dog Walker brings up a good point. They're in a 240 volt territory. A lot of Europe is, actually, I think just about all of Europe is 240 volt. Most of the world is 240 volt. And 50 hertz in a lot of cases versus the 60 in the US. Japan is funny. It's 100 to 110 volt rated, so a little less voltage than here for whatever reason. But half the country is 60 hertz and half the country is 50 hertz. Yep, wrap your head around that one. Still messes with me to this day.
Making the wire get hot. And they're using the heat to dry your clothes. You could do the same thing by hanging them outside in the wind. And it wouldn't cost you anything. But if you want to run them in electric dryer,
240 is dropped from the from the primary transformer for the entirety of that phase, but there's second tappings that give the 110/120 range. It's split at the transformer because the only way to do such stuff is through a transformer. You can't just magically change it without equipment that's better suited to be in the actual distribution point to the house.
then you can pay the money for the electric company to produce electricity.
More correctly, it almost depends on where the particular circuit is lined up with on the transformer. You'd have to see diagrams of it. I can't explain it very well, at least not right now.
Electricity to heat the wire to dry your clothes, or heat the water to take a bath or whatever. That's one of the uses of electricity. Is
Hey AJ, yeah, thanks, man. I definitely intend on going through this. I mean, this is driving me freaking bonkers because electricity is my jam, but and it's hot in here. But we got to show that Kent can't teach, even though there's a few things he's actually been decent on. Everyone thank AJ for sharing this stuff with me because I've been hoping to come across it for a while.
to produce heat. That's generally done by running it through a special kind of wire that gets hot when it gets crowded, full of electricity. Some wires get hot and glow. Now, a light, when you turn on a light bulb,
All wires get hot and glow if you put enough voltage through them. And of course, that's not correct, Put enough current through them. They'll get hot and glow.
they're really actually pretty inefficient. They produce a lot more heat than they do light. Here we have a little dinosaur here. Turn the light on. Inside this little dinosaur somebody sent me is a light bulb. This is not a very bright white light bulb. It still takes 110 volts but probably very, very low amperage. There's a real tiny wire inside. It just won't let much electricity go through. Electricity tries to crowd through the wire, and it gets hot and it glows. And it doesn't glow very bright.
Well, let's see, Kent. If that bulb was rated, let's say 10 amp or 10 watts at 110 volts, sorry, I forgot Ohm's law. That's kind of a critical thing. Hang on. I'm using a damn internet calculator because I've lost all my ability to wrap my head around something that I love this much. Power rating is 10 watts at 110 volts. Oh no, I was right. It's 0.09 amps at a rated of 1,210 ohms for the resistance. Okay, I was right. The number just seemed ridiculous.
They measure how
So yeah, I just had to double check.
bright it glows in watts. We'll get into that later. Now we have...
No, they measure the power usage in watts. The brightness is measured in lumens, something that you idiots couldn't understand back in 2009, 2010 when I worked at Walmart. And for a while, to help try to conserve energy, bulbs were downrated some. And there were whole guides explaining this stuff, and y'all bitched because suddenly your 100-watt incandescent was a 97 watt or a 92 watt or whatever. When there were fucking CFLs right there that would have done just as fine, but you didn't want to get those. No, they make my eyes hurt. Get the fuck over it.
Along the way, the electricity wants to come from one wire. Electricity wants to come in this one. And
oh my god, yeah, it is Dino Lamp. Grandfather, why have you forsaken your grandson in 2025? Go forth and rescue him. Bring him to Kentucky so that Yamato may steal him. I would do that every day, just make little hostage videos of DAL's Dino Lamp. If you want him back, send 10,000 Hovenbucks to Yamato.
Go to this one. But we're going to make it where the electricity has to do some work on the way. In order to get from here to here, it has to go through this wire, through the light, make it light up, and come back and back out the other side. The other side, the fat one, one's skinnier and one's fatter. The fat one on your plug here, plugs into the wall. That goes through a wire back to the electrical panel over there. And outside the building, we pounded a great big copper rod down into the ground and hooked it up. And the electricity is going to go through here, through the wire, and to the ground. It's gone. Sometimes clouds will rub together during stormy weather, and they build up a big electrical charge. And all of a sudden, that electrical charge jumps off cloud. What do we call that? A lightning. Right, and it jumps up pretty far. Right?
Except that technically speaking, the current flow in lightning is, from my understanding, unless this has changed from ground to earth, but the branching path is created by a sort of precursor effect from the cloud to the ground. But the actual current flow is backwards from what we think.
And it jumps, matter of fact, it takes, depending on a lot of conditions, but roughly about 10,000 volts is needed to jump 1 inch. So how many volts in a lightning bolt? They say there's enough electricity in one lightning strike to power the entire United States for a few seconds. Lots and lots of electricity. If you can figure out a way to catch that and do something with it, you'll be rich, okay?
Because it's all about making money. Nothing's about the betterment of humanity. Nope, it's all about making money.
While you're practicing catching it, stay away from my house, okay? What they did on
Not your house no more, is it, Kent?
this little light they gave me, on the way to let the electricity run through here, they put a little switch. And we'll take one of these apart later. You roll this, and it connects the wires. You roll it again, and it disconnects the wires. Basically, the electricity wants to do one thing. It wants to get to the ground.
Yes, you've said this.
Now, if you provide a way for it to get to the ground, like if I, cut one of these wires and I hold one in one hand and one in the other hand, electricity would be glad to go through me. It doesn't care, right? Because my body has blood and water in it, and it'll boil it on the way, which is not a good thing.
It's mostly going to move over the surface, Kent.
When you get hit by lightning, that's typically what happens is it boils the blood in your body because there's too much electricity going through.
No, your body's actually a kind of shit conductor in the grand scheme, although it is a conductor rather than a true insulator. And so resistance generates heat. That heat causes the blood boiling problem, amongst all the other damage that happens from, electrical burns from lightning strikes.
And if your blood gets boiled, doesn't carry oxygen, and you probably will die or have serious problems. I met a guy.
Boy, sure is a lot of death in this children's educational video about electricity.
A preacher at a church I spoke at a few weeks ago had both of his arms are gone. He's the pastor of the church here in Pensacola area, up on the north side by Century. I said, "What
No one cares!"
happened to your arms?" He said, "Well, I grabbed an electrical wire." There's a guy at the barber shop over here on Creighton Road. His son was working for Gulf Power and didn't realize somebody had turned the switch back on, and he was trying to fix the wires, and bam, burned his arms up to here. And it was burned so bad, took him to the hospital, and they said, "Well, we have to cut him off." Anybody ever met him, Mr. Brannon? Both of his arms are cut off right here from high voltage electricity. We don't want that to happen to you, so we're going to teach you a little bit about electrical safety.
Like any of these kids have fields at all in in high voltage electrical industry. They don't. They don't. I would bet that none of them got careers in anything remotely related to high voltage electricity.
I had a student in one of my classes one time. She had a scar right here on each corner of her mouth. Pretty bad scar. She was like 16 years old, real pretty girl. I said, "What happened? What happened to your mouth?" She said, "When I was a baby, I bit into an extension cord." Bam! Woo! Still scarred 16 years later. Moral of the story is, don't bite into electrical cord.
Well, yeah, that's kind of how scars work. If it wasn't a scar, it would have healed up.
Cords. Okay? Electricity can be used for all sorts of very interesting things, and we want you to know all about it and learn how to use it, but you have to be careful. It has no conscience whatsoever. And the better you get working with electricity, the more likely you are to be kind of careless. "Oh, I can handle that." First time you forget, it won't forget. We had a hurricane here several years ago, and we had the generator hooked up to make electricity to run the house.
Oh no, I know where this is going. Place your bets now on what Kent's about to say, because I think he's gonna say, "Oh, we just plugged it right into the wall and didn't realize it backfeed into the system," or something to that effect.
The city, the power lines broke, and they couldn't send me any electricity. It took them like 3 days to fix it, so we're running off the generator. Well, when it came time to shut the generator off, kids hollered, "Hey, the power company's working again. It's back on." Okay, good. So I went in and I said, "Now listen, I'm going to unplug the wires, from the generator, and then when I come get you, turn the main switch back on. We'll have the power company send us electricity."
Okay, good. They had turned off the main breaker and were using the generator with their own system isolated from the grid. Very good.
Well, apparently the message didn't get quite translated correctly, because while I was unplugging the wires, they turned the main switch back on, and boom, knocked me across the garage. 220 volts straight from the power company, which is pretty high amps.
Okay, well, your kids are idiots because they are your kids after all.
What they're going to do, they're going to send us electricity through the wires over the top of the street. I don't want 7,400 volts. You plug your shaver into that thing, you can mow the grass with it, okay? For a few seconds until it burns the motor up. So I don't want 7,400 volts. But they've discovered it's easier. You can send higher voltage through a smaller wire. And since the wires cost a lot of money, copper is expensive, they can use a small wire and send high voltage clear across the country.
Except the cross-country lines and the main high-voltage lines, the power grid, are made of aluminum there, Kent.
Real tiny wire, hundreds of thousands of volts. When it gets to the other end, they have a machine, a little device.
Yeah, we've got 500 kilovolt lines coming from Nashville heading south through an area of town I used to live at. Across some major roads there. They are big ass 500 kilovolt lines. Fucking love them. Three, it's three sets per phase. That's how much oomph those things are carrying at 500 volts each. It's three separate lines going along the same route. Multiples of the same route. There's a to and fro. It's fucking awesome.
Device called a transformer, not like the toys you buy at the store.
Robots in disguise.
There's a round pole out hanging on the telephone pole. It brings in 7,400 volts, and it changes it to probably 440 volts, or 220, I guess, for here. It changes it to 220 volts. I can handle 220 volts. That's what I'd like to have. I bring the 220 volts into the house, and I split it. 110 on this side, 110 on that side. There'll be 3 wires.
That's not where the split happens.
If I hook on between these two, I get 110. If I hook between these two, I get 110. If I like 220, I go from the outside to the outside, and I get 220.
Yeah, because it's the transformer coil is tapped. It's center tapped at a point, and that's how you get the full 220. Or you only get half because you're only going through half the windings. Or you can go through both the full winding and get the full 220. That's how that works. The split happens at the transformer, be it out in a green box out by the street or on a pole behind your house.
So if I want to hook up a dryer or anything electrical, that takes 220 volts. Like we had to run wires for our welder out here because it takes 220 volts. Let's go outside. I'm going to show you the transformer, how the wire comes in. Then, of course, electric company wants to make money off of me, so they're going to have a meter to see how much I'm using.
Oh, God, with the sausage shit. Holren doesn't need to pay for anything.
All right, let's go outside.
And no, things like utility services and the like should most definitely just be a, common good. It shouldn't be something that companies are making profit off of. But that's neither here nor there for the grand scheme of what, Hovind is implying.
You will see that big canister. That is a transformer that changes the electricity from 7,400 volts down to 220 volts. And they change the electricity in there, and that thing will get pretty hot because electricity moving through wires produces heat. So sometimes they have big ones and they have little
Electricity power inefficiently moving through wires produces heat, Kent. They're not going to be perfect conductors, so you're going to get some heat. But that's not by design, and that is something semi-avoidable. You have to find a nice balance.
They're full of oil to keep them cooled off.
And to insulate them from the outside world.
Sometimes at the mall or something, they have a giant transformer with little fins of oil sticking on the outside and have circulation through there just to keep them cooled down. From the top of that transformer, they're sending electricity over to my house and to their house and to that pole, which goes to several more houses. This one transformer is providing probably 5 houses. If a squirrel gets up there and eats through the wrong wire and blows this transformer, only those 5 houses go out. So the power company will try to see, who doesn't have electricity. If half the street doesn't have it and half does, they can figure out which transformers blew. There's one here, there's one on that pole down there.
I just love that the camera person didn't think, hey, maybe I should aim up and show the transformer. No, instead, I'm contractually obligated to show Hovind. Also, given that this is clearly a neighborhood, that shows how all of this seriously shows the kind of dominion Kent had. Because I don't know if this is Cummings Road or that other road that they had, but I could probably find out if I just compared stuff on Google Street View today, what have you. But they owned like a whole little chunk of this neighborhood in effect. And just one of the houses was Hovind's little homeschool.
I think there's one on the next pole. There are probably 5 or 6 on this whole street to handle maybe 15 or 20 houses. We had a squirrel come get in this one years ago, blew the transformer. I said, hey, guys, we're going to put a couple more buildings on. Would you put a bigger transformer in? You said, okay, because we'll handle some more building. All right, let me show you where it goes. On the side of that pole, there's that gray covering. There are 3 great big wires in there.
Ah, there you go. There you go. You finally zoom up. You finally zoom up. Now, what I'll tell you to notice is the fact that up at the very top of the pole, well, not the very top of the pole, but coming in, the highest wire you see on the right, that's going to be the actual, or is that, no, that's the grounding wire. No, the one, hang on, there's too few pixels to be able to totally tell, but I'm pretty sure the upper line on the right is the actual line carrying the voltage going through an arrestor assembly in case of a lightning strike, what have you. Otherwise, heading into the transformer. And then, as Hovind continues to explain, with it going down that gray pipe to all the houses.
Probably as big as my thumb. Big copper wires. They come down to a pipe. That pipe goes under the ground, under the driveway. We had to dig a trench in the ground about 3.5 or 4 feet deep, and we put a big pipe in so all those wires can run through there. It goes all the way out to Building 5 to our museum. Every house has electricity coming in either underground or overhead through the wires overhead. My house has the wires going overhead. Building 5 has the wires going underground.
Okay, so that is that's going to be 29 Cummings then. I'm going to have to do some research on that area. Again, do some old and new. Like, if you go back to the oldest Google Street Views, you can see the old DAL signage and stuff, and then you slowly see things change.
It's a little more expensive to put them underground, but it looks a little neater. Some communities have no telephone poles. They have all the wires underground. The problem is, if you get a broken wire, how do you fix it? You dig it up, right? It's a lot easier to fix when they're overhead, but there's problems there too. There's advantages and disadvantages. Generally, it's more expensive to go underground, and it's harder to fix, but it looks nicer. And some people say, we don't care if it costs an extra $500. We want our neighborhood to look nice. We don't like telephone poles around. They use these poles for quite a few other things. They use them to hang the wires for your telephone. That's why they call it a telephone pole. Actually, it's a power pole. Okay? Power company doesn't like them called telephone poles because they're power poles. They pay for them. The telephone company rents the space and says, look, can we hang our wire on your pole? They say, yeah, you can use our poles, for 2 cents a month for every pole or something like that. Also, the cable company says, well, hey, we don't want to go put poles to put our cable to everybody's house. Can we hang our cables on your poles? Well, sure, you pay us. So the power company gets money from you for using electricity and from the cable and telephone company for using their poles.
It's all about the money. It isn't about science, it's about the money.
Now, if a car comes along and hits one of these, breaks it off, everything's laying on the ground. The electricity going through those wires wants to go to the ground, right? Don't go pick it up. You see a wire laying on the ground from a car hitting a telephone pole, call the people that know what to do. You want to find something that won't conduct electricity. If you have to grab the wire because it's, electrocuting somebody, get a long...
Well, if it's electrocuting them, then they're dead. If it's shocking them, they're still probably dead at that point.
Long stick and push it off because electricity won't go through wood very well. If the stick is wet, not a good idea. It will go through wet wood.
Yeah, the general term would just be utility poles.
All right. If you can get something plastic or something wood that the electricity won't go through, if you see a car hit the pole, the wires are laying on top of the car, and people inside going, well, up on top of these transformers, there's a great big switch, just like you flip a light switch. There's a huge switch. It's a big steel bar that flips up and touches. What the guys do when they change these things, they get a long pole made out of fiberglass, so it won't shock them, and they unhook that switch.
And depending on where you live and the way the grid is laid out in your area, if you've got a lot of above ground lines, you can actually look and see sections that are intentionally open. And what they do is, if there's an open circuit somewhere in your local line, to quickly restore power, they just open where the open is. They open up a section, close. The main thing is close the other section, and then work around it, and then eventually set things up to normal. As long as the line's connected, everything's good. My old neighborhood had 4 sections. Yeah, I'd mapped it out because I was a nerd. It was 2010, and I felt like it. That's back when I had energy and spirit to do those kinds of nerdy things. Um, there was one down the way. It was a very noticeable one, making a little zigzag across an area, and it was a cool one. Not part of my grid section though, but yeah.
You can drive down the neighborhood and grab that switch and shut off everybody's house. So if you have a broken wire someplace, a tree limb falls on a wire, they're going to flip that switch, and then they're going to fix the wire. When they're done fixing the wire, they're going to trip that big switch back. So if you watch
And they will do that as well. I mean, Ken's not wrong here.
them sometime when they're changing out a meter or changing out a transformer, you'll see them up there with that big switch. They're pulling it down, and then they work on it, and then they flip it back when they're safe. So this wire goes all the way, these 3 wires.
And there's automated systems. In fact, whenever you have a power outage, the power comes back, then it cuts off immediately again. It's going to be one of those recloser systems tripping because it ends up detecting a fault on the line, usually from some short circuit somewhere. That's what that is.
All the way underground, clear up to the meter. Let me go show you where the meters go. On my house, the electricity comes overhead through these wires, and it goes into that thing on top called a weather head. You don't want the water to run down the wires when it rains. So what they do is they bring the wires into this thing, and notice it go up into the weather head, and then it goes back down. If it just ran down, every time it rains, water would run down the wire inside your house. So most houses, if you have electricity overhead, will have what's called a weather head, and you can
God damn it. I was going to say, look at all that stuff lying for Jesus will get you. And this bastard's still fucked up and lost it all.
You can buy those at Home Depot for different size, for how big a wire you got coming in. It goes through this big pipe down to the meter. Come on over, we'll show you the meter. The electricity, there are those big wires coming down through this pipe, and they go into this meter, because electricity moving through a wire produces
This meter. We have to keep the water out of the meter.
a magnetic field. So they make these meters with, as the electricity goes past, it turns a magnet. And it makes this wheel turn. And they come by once a month and read the numbers and see how much electricity did you use. Some people will try to cheat the power company by putting magnets next to their meter to make it turn slower. Well, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you're going to make it turn faster. It will greatly increase your power company bill. Plus, if they find you having magnets on there trying to affect the meter, they will say, we can't trust this person, unplug the meter and take it home. Now you have no electricity at all. Our neighbors had a wire running underground to their house. Their house was fed with underground wire, and they were going to put in a fence. And so they're digging a hole for the fence post. Well, my brother and I were building the house across the street, and we heard a loud boom, and we looked over and saw a post hole digger flying through the air. The guys were all laying on the ground, where it knocked them backwards, didn't kill them, just really, really surprised them. When the post hole digger landed, it had 2 great big chunks of metal gone out of the post hole digger, because they had got into the wrong wire. So sometimes you'll see signs around town, you know, before you dig, call us. If you are, you know, digging a trench to put in something across your yard, you might want to be sure there are no electric wires there, no fiber optic cable, because if you cut a fiber optic cable, they get really upset. They charge you, how much do they charge Bill for? $10,000 an hour or something, or, you know, whatever. Because you may shut down half the city, you know, by cutting a cable. So if there's a sign that says, you know, call before you dig, we suggest you call before you dig.
Once again, welcome to America, dog walker. That's how things are here.
If you're trenching with a trencher and you hit a gas line supplying natural gas to half the neighborhood, now what's going to happen? Your trencher is made out of steel, and you're cutting through a steel pipe, and steel rubbing against steel makes a spark, and
Boom.
boom, right. You and the trencher land in the neighbor's yard, maybe, or in the next county. Okay, so electricity is wonderful. I think we should use it, but be real careful, because the wires coming through here are, if I grab one of those, there is no safety valve to shut it off. It would cook me to a crispy critter. Inside the house, then, we have a panel with a bunch of switches to decide, okay, where's this electricity going to go? We're going to branch off. Some of it goes to the bedroom, some goes to the kitchen, and each area of the house has a different breaker.
Hold up. Look at that goddamn breaker box. Look at all those
So
fucking
we're going to branch off.
switches.
Some of it goes to the bedroom,
Jesus fucking Christ. I've seen fewer switches at places I've worked.
some goes to the kitchen, and each area of the house has a different breaker. And next week when we meet, we'll talk to you about how some of the electricity is broken up into systems, how it has circuits that it goes through, and you can only have a certain amount of electricity on each circuit. If you try to get too much, something will go wrong. So if you want to have lots of electric stuff in your house, then you need lots of circuits. And it's going to cost more. And Mr. Bill and my son Eric will be teaching the class next week, showing you how the electricity inside your house, now you know how it gets to the house, what happens once it gets in the house, and how do you fix
No, Kent, you really didn't explain that at all.
things if it breaks. If anything from here up to there breaks, I don't touch it. I call the power company. That's their property. They own the wire from the pole to my house. They own the meter. Sometimes these go bad. They have to put a new one on. Okay. We have also behind this meter a little space in here. My meter sets out about 3 inches farther than most meters. You can spend about, $3 a month extra to get lightning protection for the whole house. Doesn't work 100% of the time, but it helps, okay? If lightning hits, boom! Instead of all that lightning going into my electric razor, this will break inside here. And there's a little window in the bottom. They'll come look up inside there, and if you can see through it, everything's fine. If it gets all cloudy, that means something inside burned and a bunch of stuff fell to the bottom. So you can come by and look in the little window there in a minute, and you can see right through this safety fuse for lightning arresting. But they charge a couple bucks a month. If you have a lot of computers in your house, it might be worth doing that. Plus, to keep your computer from getting blown with a lightning strike, because Pensacola gets a lot of lightning strikes, and especially that telephone pole gets a lot of lightning strikes. I think we've been hit about 8 times since we've been here in this house. We get hit a lot. I don't know what it is, if there's water underground or something, but the lightning likes that pole right there. So we have protection here, plus just before the computer plugs in, we have a special lightning arrestor on each computer. Uninterrupted power supply, UPS. It's a little battery. If the power goes out, the battery beeps, beep, 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 and it warns you you got 20 minutes of electricity left, or 30 or whatever your power supply is, and we're gonna, your computer's gonna go dead.
Hovind living that fancy life, having tech I just fucking dream to have even now. Love to have a UPS. Don't got one. Just deal with it as it comes. All at people's donations. Must be nice.
All right, next week. See you then. Thank you.
Oh, good. It's over. Wow, that was irritating. Do I sound irritated? Do I sound like a man who just had a subject he loved get butchered to a point where he couldn't even articulate how many levels of fucking wrong Hovind was? And then also get equally surprised when he somehow says shit right? That was an adventure. That was an adventure. On the plus side, he didn't bitch about evolution once. On the downside, it was still Hovind. Oh no, it was something. Yep, it was something. But yeah, so that was Hovind's first video on electricity. Yeah, no. AJ saying cool avatar. Thanks, bro. Someone suggested I give something a go. Not gonna say who, but he gave me the idea of I might want to gussy things up, and then this got made. I don't know if you're here for the beginning, AJ, but I actually took the original image, mirrored the left side of it to the right side, so that it would be perfectly symmetrical. And yeah, I went that route. So yeah, everyone likes the new avatar. Yay! Very good. I'll get used to it. It is growing on me. Sorry, the yawns are hitting. It's been a lazy afternoon. But yeah, that's gonna be that. just thought this would be fun as a little experiment. We may do these more off and on as time goes on. I don't feel like devoting too much time to these, but this one I thought would be something worth going at, just to demonstrate. But yeah, y'all know the score. Much love. Hit the links in the description, all that jazz.